put your best. Okay, I will call the October 21st, 2021 regular meeting with the Southbury Board of Selectmen to order at 7. Could we have the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up is Tim Baldwin. He give us the EMS plan presentation. Tim?
All right. Good evening. So this presentation was an expansion of the presentation I did back in 2018. I just kind of modified it a little bit for tonight's purposes. Most of you are aware, my background, emergency services for 35 years in town, service chief for 20 in multiple services, EMS and all aspects of it. So a lot of that experience was utilized with this. So 19A 181B is the enabling statute that regarding local or EMS plans. 2014, it was changed, and basically what it did was it expanded some control of the provisions of EMS within the town. And there was a lot of references, a lot of theories behind when Kem Smack pushed that through with the legislation. History in Southbury. There was a gentleman in town by the name of Bob Corrigan, i.e. Corrigan Motors. He was the EMS guy in this side of the state. His office was in Southbury. He took care of the northwest corner of the state for a regional EMS. In his role, he assumed quite a bit of the EMS planning, and he did assist municipalities with putting their plans together. In 2013, the woman that took his place when they reworked that system urged the town EMS committee, which was the old committee, to update the old plan, which we did. It came through this board, was approved. So there was 2014, the Narcan provisions were added into that 2013 plan, which was approved by this body as well. Those statute changes I talked about in 14 were implemented in 16, and our plan development began in 17. Overview of some of the requirements was that, and this all comes from the toolkit, which OEMS has a toolkit. Here's the overview of the requirements. The toolkit that they provided for the municipalities on what their expectations were for an EMS plan, of which is what we followed. That's the format of the plan that's in front of you. Basically, they had two documents. They had the toolkit, and they had a sample plan. And as you look at, if you were to look at the sample plan, you'll see that the main part of the plan, that first document, mirrors that very closely. So overview of the requirements from the toolkit, details of, needs to include these details. Again, I'm not going to read these slides to you. The addendum material that's in the EMS plan, which there's the main plan and 10 addendums. That's covering things like the mass casualty plans, the various contracts, performance measures, maps of the town, basically so that the reader can have a pretty good understanding of the EMS system within town. So on one very snowy evening in January 2018, there was a stakeholders meeting. Sounds like the beginning of a Lifetime movie, I guess. Which it was. I mean, it was like actually Mike, Jason, and I debated for about 3 hours that afternoon if we were going to have the meeting or not. And Mike had the snow stop down in Stanford, so it's like, okay, we're golden.
We had a meeting.
So, yeah. So the project was assigned to myself as the Deputy Fire Marshal to facilitate the program development. All the EMS system providers were equally being requested for the same data if they had it. So it was a very transparent approach on how we did this. And it was done very much transparently. One of the things that we did was I ensured all communication was in email so that everybody could see it. It was easy to copy. There wasn't anything behind the scenes, that sort of thing. So the providers, when this started, we actually had 7 providers. That's when STS had transport ambulance. Now it's just first responder. We had camping involved by contract as well. So things have changed quite a bit since we started in 2017, 2018. As I just mentioned, Jason and Mike were involved. We had everybody involved. Some changes have occurred with the new EMS committee, some refining of some of the concepts within the plan. So the bulk of my changes that I did as I was writing this was all based off the toolkit. So, a lot of the stuff that was submitted by the services was tailored towards their needs, and that's what was brought in as the best we could. Not everything was brought in, but when things came in, it was debated, yep, we're going to do this, yep, well, we're going to tweak this. There's like, no, can't put this in because of this. So there wasn't any blankets like, no, we're not doing that. So that was very much transparent through the process. So the main plan, this is the sections of the plan. Let's see. So the glossary of terms, with glossary of terms, just like many industries, has its own language. Many of you have learned ALS, BLS, PSA, PSAP, so on and so forth. That's all broken down into there. The purpose statement was something that's from the main plan. Basically, the way this is set up is that it does give the reader a solid understanding of the system in town, which is something that's been challenging for the years since I've been involved with the old EMS committee, and there was always difficulties, as many of this board knows, of having to understand how the convoluted EMS system works. And so hopefully this kind of clarifies that a little bit better. So this is what the main plan has. As we look at Appendixes 1 and 2, I did mention with the information that came to you that there was some errors in emails. And Appendixes 1, 2, 3, and 4 came to you late. The errors in the, so what you received early on was the documents that was pre-SAA ALS and pre the 2020 documents. So with that, Appendix 1 is the maps, and basically what the difference that you have between the old and the new is that the titles of the maps were incorrect. Where there would be one map for SAA for ALS, that's the entire town, that wasn't on the entire town map. So it was very simple stuff, but it's from historical purposes. Appendix 2, the change with that was the older document had the original Articles of Incorporation for SAA. What was sent to you yesterday is the 2019 revisions. So, and Appendix 2 is just their governance documents for all the entities involved. Appendix 3, there was no changes. That was the local ordinances. Maybe it had the old EMS committee on it. I'd have to look again. But what you did receive is the current ordinances. It's only 3 documents. The resolution to create a new EMS committee, the expense reimbursement documents for the volunteer appreciation program, and the criteria document, which is all on the town website as well. The EMS agreements, what is in it now is the DDS and Town of Southbury Dispatch MOU, the SAA documents, and the Heritage Village documents. The older version had some of the camping stuff for the old ALS provisions. Appendix 5 through 6, this is what you've had for over a week. It talks about the mutual aid agreements that are in place. The performance measures, this is a required section. There's been some controversy about it. And within the performance measures, the 2018 stakeholders meeting, we had a fairly long discussion, and it was thought that there was not a need for performance measures for first responder. So that has carried from that original meeting, that there is no performance measures for the first responder within the document. The current performance measures have been provided based on the historical data that the current EMS committee developed, and was in the annual report that came out last month. It does reflect a 1 minute improvement from the data analysis from 2018, 2019. But the services are meeting that today. This is great that they've improved by 1 minute at 90% of the time.
Okay, so that's a good question about that. Thinking back to the meeting that we were at.
Yes.
And the lengthy discussion we had on this very topic.
Yeah.
Have the service providers all been involved in coming up with the performance standards that are in the plan, and are they in agreement with what's been developed?
They were involved with the original, and then the only thing that has changed has been that 1 minute improvement. I can't say whether or not they're totally on board with that. I'm not sure.
I'm sure we'll hear from one of them today, but
And just to give some insight on this, where the committee's kind of head was, is that when they look at, there's a national metric for, it's on, yeah. There's a national metric, and Tim, you can help me if I get this
Yep.
wrong. When you look at areas such as ours on performance measures nationally, that national average is about 9 minutes. So they weren't going to say, well, get to 9 minutes, and there's some debate over how rural versus suburban and us being kind of a mix of in between. So, would it be right to get to 9 minutes, but to definitely look at an improvement and to take it down from a minute? And there's no ramifications if that isn't met necessarily, but to be able to continue to provide an increased public safety measure. Does that about sum it up?
Before we get too
Yep.
far, do you want to finish your presentation
was
and
gonna
wait
ask.
for,
Okay,
why don't we do that?
all right, that's fine.
And Jeff-
Hold-
Okay.
Just hold your questions,
And
please.
Jeff, just one thing, will we have time, and if we could, since there are some of the members of the services here, can we have time to hear from them if we have questions as well, to ask
Yeah,
them? Okay.
let's get through this. I don't know how long this is.
No, I have not much, there's 10 appendixes and there's 2 more slides
Three
after
more
that.
hours.
No
And I
pressure.
was jumping them on. Hey, I'm trying.
One of 90.
Let's see. So one technical correction that needs to be done because this document, I have to remove the draft, and I remove some dates and that sort of thing. There is one item in the performance measures that speaks that dispatch does not identify hot and cold call identification. They do, and that will be done at the time of the final editing. All right, so we are at, okay. Performance measures, we kind of talked about that, actually what Emily was just talking about. Started with the national standards, and then we kind of just brought it locally. Basically, the key piece with the background of this is, how does a municipality expect and want the EMS entity to perform? That's really what it comes down to. And with the legislative change, that was never permitted in the past. It was never permitted, and that was one of the big things behind the EMS planning. Appendix 7 and 8, quality assurance. There was a lot of discussion. There was some early discrepancies at that snowy night as far as what was required and what was not. OEMS did get back to us and clarified it very clear, and that is what is reflected in here. And the concept of quality assurance, as we all know, is key to overall system improvement. Each service does do their own quality assurance individually. Mass casualty plans, you'll see in another slide that mass casualty plans, let me say that 3 times fast, is a long-term goal and objective. We need to look at updating those. They're very, very dated, and the service chiefs are aware of that. The concept may change, but that is a long-term goal that is in another slide. And data gathering, Appendix 10. The EMS committee is very data focused to do their job based off of the what they're part of their charge, and that's where that came from. And that has been controversial. Long-term goals and objectives. The intent of this section is identify what is desired. The committee continues to look at this long-term goals. The goals that were identified early on, there were some that were identified early on back in 2018 that have already been completed. The new EMS committee, that's been completed, that's off the list. Developing a paramedic system in town, that's been completed, that's off the list. But on the list of things to do is the current mass casualty stuff, recruitment and retention of volunteers, and some discussion on safe work environment for municipal workforce, kind of going along with the concept of community risk reduction. Some areas to consider based off of some of these national documents that the stuff is based on. I mean, field operations. How is it? Is it going well? How, you know, what needs to be done? Any improvements? QA improvements. Is dispatch meeting the needs of EMS? Are the patients satisfied in methods to improve? And are there methods to improve? We don't know. So there's maybe some stuff that we may be looking at in the future. The performance process performance indicators is kind of like guiding a lot of that, which is a national document. So where are we at? Basically, this document was sent to OEMS for initial unofficial review. The response that came back was I was quite happy with it. It's up there. The EMS committee, they spent some time to understand the plan and they made some adjustments. If there's going to be any changes that comes by the Board of Selectmen tonight, I would suggest that the EMS committee have some input on that. They do have a lot of ownership to this. Once this is approved, it will need to be signed by the EMS service chiefs and the first selectman. Once that occurs, it is submitted to OEMS and it also goes to the Region 5 EMS Council. And then we begin the next round of updating because it is a living document, constantly updating. At the minimum, the EMS has to submit annual updates with their certifications, their ability to bill, so on and so forth, which is stuff that's in there as well. So this legislation has been a new concept for many EMS providers. They're just coming up to the, pretty soon there'll be the first round of revisions. I just want to reiterate that the work has been done in an open approach. There was considerable concern about that, and I do feel that it was. There have been disagreements from time to time, but, you know, there's going to be. I mean, this board here has never been able to go 6 months without a disagreement some way, somehow, so. And yes, I actually said that. How's that? So that is the presentation I have for you. And lastly, thanks for Mike, Emily, and Jason for you guys with your involvement from the board. Needed some support for different parts of this, and I appreciate that. So.
Okay, so for the board, I open it up if anybody has any questions of Tim to start.
Before
Right,
we
since
jump
you-
in, I just
yeah.
wanted to say thank you, Tim, for taking the time to come out here tonight and to represent all of this, but also to the entire committee. I continue to say this. I mean, we put together, I know Mike, George, myself sat down and looked over some really impressive resumes, and I've continued to be impressed by this group and the work that they put in, the expertise that they have. So it's been a long document to get through and to come to this point, and just wanted to say thank you for it.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Tim,
Yep.
and thanks for the thanks. It's been a long road, I know. What I would like to do, I know that Geraldine Hoyt wasn't able to attend tonight, but I do think because ultimately this document has to be signed off on by the EMS chiefs, and I see representatives from both organizations here, if it pleases the chair and the rest of the board, I think it's worth hearing from them to hear what some of those controversial things are, where there is some disagreement, which shows areas that we still might need to work on to ensure that the EMS chiefs are signing this from a place of unity, frankly, and I think that's really important. I don't know if you want to wait to see if there are any other questions first, but I do think it's important that we hear from them to have their voice heard during this public discussion of it.
Okay.
No, I agree with that after we're, have a little discussion here. I do think we need to hear from them because, as Tim mentioned, they do have to sign it. So, so we need, we don't want to approve something that they're not going to sign. So, if there's any issues, we need to work through that, and, I'm sure that won't be an issue. I just want to thank Tim for, it's been a number of years now, and it's been a lot of work, and thank the committee and everything for putting this all together. There was one part of here that was, it looks a lot similar than it did a few years ago, where it's highlighted, it's Board of Selectmen remarks.
Yes, so that was something that I copy and pasted from
Right.
somewhere, wrote it for you guys, if you guys want to keep it
So I
in
didn't know
there,
if you
keep
needed,
it in there.
what you were looking for from us, or if that was sufficient, or if you're looking
Absolutely.
for something further from us,
Yes.
or, okay,
Right, that's, yeah.
got it.
Okay, so procedurally, should we bring them forward now or during the discussion? This is the presentation. I just want to make sure we,
I would just do it, I would do it now.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, okay. I just want to make sure procedurally we're all okay with that. Yes, this was a very long process. This has been a tremendous shift from years ago with our EMS, our paramedics, our contracts. It's been a big shift, which is understandable why it would be a lot of changes and frankly angst of how we do this. And I do appreciate the group's work on this. So with that, is there anybody from the EMS that would like to speak? George, would you like to comment, or would you like to come up? I'm asking you as the EMS if you'd
Yeah.
like to speak, yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is George Goodwin, and many of you know I'm been honored to be chief of service for one of the two EMS services in town. And to some extent, I'd like to stand here for Ms. Hoyt, my counterpart, as well. She couldn't be here tonight, and I know Bert is here, and he'll have something to say as well. The EMS plan, as noted, it will be a contract between the town CEO, the stakeholders, and the state via OEMS. And we were apprised of that some years ago. We wrote the first one as the older EMS committee. And in fact, this EMS plan was written by us 3 years ago. With the reorganization of that committee, they sort of reset it to zero. But as somebody noted, and I think Mike and also Jason, if the stakeholders do not sign this, it will be rejected by the state as a flawed document. The problem, I believe, with the current EMS committee is that very often it would appear to us, biased or otherwise, that they are a solution in search of a problem. There are many towns in the state of Connecticut, 179, would give them their eye teeth to have an EMS system as robust as that serves the town of Southbury today. The town of Naugatuck just wrote a check for $2.5 million to try to rescue their service from a ditch. Town of Wolcott pays their service over $800,000 operational expenses. They buy their ambulances and they buy the fly car as well. Here in Southbury this year, Geraldine Hoyt, for one thing, saved the town of Southbury close to $500,000, returned that to the budget by assuming the cost formerly subsidized by the town for the paramedic service. And yet, the town and this committee, for the larger part of the last 3 years, have inflicted a nasty bout of serial harassment, particularly on my counterpart, which, frankly speaking, is beginning to have the stench of misogyny. And I urge this group to seriously look into it. Insofar as there are questions about the EMS plan that warrant serious discussion, and we look forward to the opportunity to talk to you about it. 2-minute sound bites, the issues are complex, but we are prepared to defend them as issues, and we are prepared, of course, to cooperate with the EMS committee. However, I think a distinction has to be made. The EMS committee, as we understand it, is an oversight committee. Normally, these committees exist where the town supports the entity involved, police, fire, and so forth. That is not the case here, but nonetheless, oversight and micromanagement are different things. And we look forward to discussing these things with you all. in the future, because these are issues that I think you should be aware of, and so should the committee. The numbers for response times, for instance, are the product of decades of experience in this town, covering 40 square miles, I do believe, with the distances and so forth. So they weren't just picked out of the sky, and the numbers that we post are higher than those provided in the EMS toolkit that Chief Baldwin just referred to. So, as I say, the issues, you can get into the weeds, and I think it's probably beyond the scope of a selectman meeting. But at a time and place, however you want to frame it, we'd be more than happy to provide documentation as needed for the positions that we hold. And safety and the response times is certainly part of it. But I do think that, there are other problems in interactions that we have, and I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. All the systems are strained, from the hospitals to the retail. You've got empty shelves in ShopRite. I just came out of 2 bouts in a hospital where the nurses are handling 12 patients each in a 12-hour shift. They're getting ready to drop. All these services are severely strained. And EMTs, we need a 3D printer to crank them out. We are recruiting. We'd be glad to discuss that. We're going to medical schools. We've had some luck there. But, it's an ongoing process. It really is. But we're here to talk to you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I,
Jason, go ahead. George.
George, you,
Jason, I'm sorry.
first off, thank you for the work you do in town. Thank you for your
Thank you.
service.
No, thank you, sir.
And thank you for bringing your concerns to this body. And I'm sure that our body will look into and address whatever concerns you may have. My question for tonight, though, is, because
Yeah.
we're being asked to approve the EMS plan, is putting aside the issues you may have with the committee, are there any issues you have with the EMS plan as presented?
Well, in some cases, they're coincidental, yeah. They are issues within the plan.
Right. Are there particular provisions within the plan that you're concerned with as written?
There are. I confess I'm not, I have notes. I have been monitoring the emails back and forth. I've been somewhat out of service of my own, but I'm aware of Ms. Hoyt's specific objections, and I share them mostly, yeah, I do.
So we're gonna hear from Southbury Ambulance. Are you,
Bert, you can have
if
Bert.
you, you're sort of picking, is it fair to say that you have some concerns with the committee, but any objections you may have, you're sort of piggybacking on Southbury Ambulance, so we'll hear from them, and that'll
Well,
encompass?
yeah, we are
concerns.
EMS together. I mean,
Okay.
we work and have for a number of years quite synergistically. The new paramedic service, for instance, we've rearranged some of the dispatch so the paramedic comes directly into the village. We don't do the intercept there. So we made some compensating adjustments for that. But it's in the interest of everybody's patient care. So, like I say, when you get into EMS, people's eyes roll. We didn't make it this complex, I assure you, but it is, yeah. I mean, the EMS plan, I believe, is what, how many pages now? How?
A lot.
Yeah, you got,
It's the main plan and 10 appendixes.
yeah, okay, there you go.
Mike, you have a question?
And Jason, because I want to make sure we
No,
have
go ahead.
clarity on this point. We're being asked tonight to approve the plan, but as Chief Baldwin made clear, that approved plan ultimately has to have the signature
There's-
approval.
Let me clarify that. Yes, it needs to have the signatures of the EMS chiefs.
Right.
There is provisions within that statute that if there's an impasse, and the municipality feels strongly that they want to have a provision in there, or the EMS entity feels that they have that they want to have a provision in there, there is an appeal process through the Department of Public Health that they will evaluate and judge a jury. So there is provisions for that.
But what, and that's good to know.
And that
I
will
don't
be
think
an
we're there yet, 'cause
egregious
it's the first time the
exercise, I
plan's
assure
being-
you.
Well, many of us have seen iterations of it over many years. It's the first time we're seeing it as a board, as a body, formally.
Yeah.
That's good. And so if, the question I guess I have for you, and once, after Bert gives his presentation or comments, I think it's important that we have a really robust discussion, is that, and I'm asking you as chief, as the chief of HVAA. If
Well, I'm
today-
15 years
Yeah,
here and
if
20
today-
years
if
in
today
EMS, yeah.
You were asked to sign the document put in front of us, which has been presented for approval by the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Would you sign it? As
At
written?
the present time, no.
Okay.
I
that's
would
what wanted
decline
to know.
that.
Thank you.
And we are prepared to discuss.
Discuss, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, the document can be salvaged. The objective here is not to torpedo the thing. I mean, I would point out that the EMS plan was due 3 years ago. Yeah. So, here we are, and another couple of months I submit, or whatever it takes to have this kind of discussion is not going to,
Thanks.
all right?
Okay.
You want to hear from my counterpart? Bert is here.
Bert Sipley, would you like to come up and, I bet you do.
Hi, Bert.
Welcome to the podium.
Thank you.
Bert's so happy Geraldine's the blame.
I can take over now, right? Just, no, thanks. Bert Sipley, Southbury Ambulance. I mean, the bottom line of this whole EMS plan is that we don't want to be set up for failure. So we want to make sure that the document is accurate, contains information on how we're actually operating, how we're operating, how we're improving our operations. Don't want to get into constraints of response times because I think Emily mentioned, I mean, it's a national recommendation. It's not a standard, if you will. We have improved. We do cover 90% of our calls within 12 minutes. We are working on ways to improve that. We're sharing, like George said, some of the responsibilities with the village. We're swapping certain areas within town to get faster response times. So, we're working at doing that. There are some questions on how we do our QA. All of our, we do QA both on a BLS and an ALS basis. That's shared within the service, within those involved in those calls. I mean, we're bound by, as you all have heard before, we're bound by statutes and rules and regulations, set forth by the state OEMS and within our own policies. What else? If there's reasons to improve response time, I mean, what we're concerned about is trying to push response time faster. Is only going to be a cause for ambulances to have to go faster on the road. We don't want that. We don't want people, safety is a top priority with us. So we don't want to try to force faster response times, when there's safety at risk. So, we're going to get to a call as fast as we can, as safely as we can. So.
Any questions of Bert?
So I think you said you're currently at 12 minutes for 90% of the
90%.
calls. That's what the proposed performance standard says.
Correct.
So.
We're there.
So you don't,
We're always trying to improve.
No, obviously, and I think we all, but do you have any issue then with the performance standard as written? Since it meets the current,
As it's
where you currently
written in
are.
there, I don't believe so, no. We're not.
So why? If we're currently at that standard, what's the concern?
We're okay with that.
That's what.
Unless I'm misreading it, and
No.
I think it says 12 minutes.
90%.
90%
there's
of the
90%
time,
time.
they're at 12 minutes, but they won't agree to 12 minutes even though they're meeting it at 90% of the time.
No, that's what I'm trying to understand.
And that's
What do you feel
Just
the
clarifying that
performance
point.
number would be?
well, like I said, right, I mean, right now, our goal is to get to that, is
But
to
what's-
maintain
what-
that 90. I don't have that information.
How long have we been at that? I mean, do you have historical data showing trends over time?
I don't have any of that with me. I mean, again,
Yeah, I know, and Mike Wilhelm, the chair, who's now here, is the one who analyzed that data.
Mike Wilhelm, chair of the EMS committee.
Am I-
So, I can speak on the response time data. The response response time data of the 13 minutes was calculated back in 2018. The EMS committee just completed for their annual report response time data for 20, and that's where the 12 minutes came from. So it's a year and a half
Of data.
of data.
So they're currently meeting the response time 90% of the time that's in the draft. And I want to also say, you know, people have to understand that this is a living document. It's a starting point to continue to review. I just want to say that if there was, let's just say the data comes another year from now, and it's found that there's a response time of 13 minutes 90% of the time. I think part of what you're going to be looking at is, let's say there was a shift of calls from within a certain area, and it was, let's say for some reason, there was a lot of calls up in the purchase area where there's a long run to get up there and windy roads. I think that would be taken a look at as part of the data of why did that change? And if it's a logistical thing that's changed, it would be understandable why. And then they would look at, is that trend going to carry? And if so, is there a solution to reducing that number? It doesn't mean that the ambulance companies would be put out to pasture, stopped, or whatever. It's a tool to look at and analyze what's going on and how come and what trends do we need to change or work with them to get there. You know, Mike?
A question, and Chief or the service chiefs, about the response times and including it in the plan. Is it a requirement of the state to include response times in the plan?
Yes.
Okay.
It is a requirement.
So there,
The document
good.
that I used is the exact document from.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with it. So,
And we're
so-
okay with 12 minutes.
Okay, so that's my question. I think, I have here an email I had gotten from Joe, and it's in my Selectmen email, so it's public record. I'm quite comfortable sharing part of it. There's a piece of me that certainly believes, and I do want to separate these. I don't want to get into the issues that Chief Goodwin talked about in terms of the committee and this. I think we should focus on the plan. We could, as Jason said, we can address the other stuff at another point. I won't be here anymore, I think, when we address that, but I'm okay with it. But I think it's important to. But I do think there's a piece of me, and Bert, if I'm wrong, tell me. I think there's a little bit of PTSD here in some regards, in terms of, you know, what we had gone through as this board together before Emily was here, and so, you know, and since. So I think there's a little bit of that here. I want to read this, though, and it's important because I don't want everyone here or those listening at home to think that there's like this huge canyon, because it's not. What Geraldine says in this email is, unfortunately, we always feel like we're in defense mode. They feel like they're not really heard. But the important thing is this. There's a lot of good information in the plan. It puts all the docs in one place for EVA reference. The plan basically is fine. All right, so I want to make it clear, the plan basically is fine. All right, what's feared is that SAA or HVA could have one item that's a hiccup in operations, and it will be used against us in a negative way, like the committee advises the town, or the town files to remove our PSA, et cetera. The plan is for EMS, but requires all other services that we work with to be in here too. So I think, to me, this issue of response times and the reticence, just using that as an example,
Mike, could you repeat that again? All other services what?
it's, the plan is for EMS, but requires all other services that we work with to be in here too, in the conversation. I think that's
Is
what
that
it is.
referencing the first responders?
I'm not sure. I'm not gonna read into an email. I'm not gonna read it, you know,
Okay.
that I'm reading the words in the email.
Because
Um,
if it's about first responders, that was a mutually agreed concept.
I don't know, and gentleman's not here to speak to it.
Okay,
But I
I'll-
do think,
Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, but I do think, I wanna be clear, it doesn't sound like there's this big chasm. It sounds like there are a couple issues, and it does sound like some of the issues is a trust issue, and a little bit of PTSD that I think we can overcome. Now, I will tell you right now, sitting at the room as part of the discussion. I'm, with one of the chiefs here, and Bert here, on behalf of Gerald and speaking as a proxy for SAA, if one of the chiefs is telling us, as of this moment, the plan submitted, they're not willing to sign off on, I personally am gonna have a problem with that, because I'm gonna wanna hear and have a more robust discussion with specifics, and that's the thing. That's what, if you're gonna say that, we as a board need specific, just like we did when we go through charter revisions and et cetera. We need specific line item edits and suggestions. We can't just say, we don't like this, or we're not comfortable because it's gonna call us. We need a solution. We may not agree with the solution and decide that it's the MS committee has made this and we're comfortable with it and we're willing to take the risk and have it submitted without signatures if we think it's reasonable as a majority of this group, a majority in a vote. But I will tell you that I do, with Gerald not here also, I have concerns with us approving the plan at this stage without having the opportunity to hear some of the specific, because it does still seem a little vague, Bert, I gotta tell you. And same thing, I wanna know why won't you sign this plan, and I haven't heard an answer yet.
I mean, some of the concern, again, just new information. Appendix 10 is an issue. I don't know what the issues are currently, but there is some issue with Appendix 10. However, if all of the concerns are listened to and heard and addressed, then per Geraldine, she would have no issue signing the plan.
Okay. Back to the performance, so you mentioned, I just want to sort of narrow the scope of what the concerns are. Something about Appendix 10 and the performance standards. I think I heard you say that you're okay with 12 minutes.
Yes.
The performance standards as written say 12 minutes, unless I'm reading it wrong. So are you okay with the performance? Like, I'm trying to understand the distinction between being okay with 12 minutes and not being okay with the performance standard that says 12 minutes.
The 12 minutes, 90% of the time is acceptable, and again, the 12 minutes is fine. I believe that there's some talk about decreasing that number from 12.
Yeah, that's part of it.
And that's where the concerns come in.
Where is,
So-
can you point that specific language out, Tim, or someone?
It takes it from 12 to
Right.
All right, one at a time. Tim?
12 to 11 to 10.
That point that he's talking about is in the annual report that was submitted back in September. And it's not part of the EMS plan, it's a recommendation that we made through item analysis of call times that we saw reported from us from dispatch. I was gonna just talk about it once you guys were willing to give me a chance to talk.
I see it in Appendix 8.
Appendix 8.
What's Appendix 8?
Goals and objectives.
Changes the response times in 22 and 23.
Right, that's what I see.
It's an objective that we're shooting for, that the EMS committee wants to see. And as, just from my 30 years from public safety, I think it's a reasonable goal and objective. Doesn't mean that that's gonna happen, no, but is it a reasonable goal and objective? I think it's a reasonable, it needs to be looked at.
I think another important piece to this, just if you can add on to, Tim, can you speak to this? What are the ramifications if these objectives or performance measures are not met by the service providers?
If they are not met, it does allow the town to start with having conversations with the services. Hey, what's going on? And then it can evolve from there. Now, yes, it's a written document, and George alluded to, it's a quasi-contract. So, could the PSA get pulled? No. Technically, it could. Realistically, when it goes to DPH for a hearing, and they see that, well, it was 13 minutes, it went to 12, now it's at 14. I mean, they may have conversations, regional coordinator coming out, say, hey, listen, what's going on, how can we help, so on and so forth. What it does do is if the response times went to 20 minutes, 90% of the times, well, now that's a concern. The 2018 data, when that was all presented, when Jason and Mike were in the room, there were some response times that unfortunately, for very justified reasons, there were some times that it was a 20-minute response time. But at the same time, those runs to River Glen from Georges Hill Road is in 4 minutes. That offsets it, which is why it's based off of an average. And so, response times 90% of the time? And it would be a fair question. I think any of us would want to know.
So I want to say this, I think we need to remember this. There's a mechanism in OEMS that there's a measurement, and let's say, for whatever reason, someone says, or it comes out and it says, we need, I'm gonna exaggerate, a 5-minute response time. And the services are not able to meet this and they can't do that. It will go to the state where there are people who know and can measure and take a look at it and essentially be what they would be a referee at the state level to say, look, 5 minutes is not the proper response time by the data collected and the locations, just like that's how they come up with this data that they have now. They'd be able to referee that in case a municipality, not saying just ours, any municipality is trying to get down to a 5-minute response time. And then OEMS will rule, right? They'll rule on, they may say that the municipality, it's not possible, it won't work, and they will go with the services of what is a reasonable. Then they may say, look to the services, they may say 12 minutes is reasonable. And you need to get a goal to try and get to there and work. So they don't strip you like that. I don't know of any EMS that has been stripped. Tim, you have?
Yeah, a couple comments. In regards to the stripping of the PSA, that's a very involved process. It requires the CEO of the community to petition OEMS for it based off of violation of the EMS plan. And then there would be the discussions, what's going on. But part of that approach from the CEO of the municipality is that they have to have provisions in place to take it over. So it's not just a matter of, hey, OEMS, we want XYZ ambulance out of here. It's like, OEMS, okay, fine. No, it needs to be, it's an involved process. It's an involved
Mike?
process.
George seems to be raising his hand for a while, so I wanted to.
Okay.
I think this body should be aware of the fact that, and I have assembled documentation which I will send each of you, specifically about basically weaponizing the response times as a measurement. There is data compiled in a number of major studies that's out there nationally, and it all comes back to the same thing, that response times, faster ones or speed, and lights and siren particularly, do not add 1 iota to patient care or patient outcomes. Furthermore, the same studies will show that risk quotient goes up logarithmically with the speed associated with, and it goes on from there. But basically, there's a legal community and the insurance community, they're hand in hand. They would like to see lights and siren removed from EMS. And it's not just me, and I have attachments I would gladly share with you. They're national, and it's not here yet, but I doubt very much that should all these things happen, I think DPH is very aware of this. And being rural as we are, you're up against distances. Now we have global warming, or whatever you care to call it. We've been hit by weather. I've been in the EOC 12 times, and it's always been weather events, and now we're having more of them. So that's going to hammer your response times every time. So the cooperation with Public Works, the fire department becomes critical there, just so we can do our job every day to get to those places. But they are really deaf on this, and the thing that's going to level it each time is it adds nothing to patient care.
George, can I ask
Sure.
you something? What do you think the average response time that's required by the document would be? You've been at this for a long time. You've been
Yeah.
working. What would be the average?
There's math associated with that, and frankly, I'm working on another data thing.
But George, we've been working on this. I'm just wondering, you must have
It
some
hasn't
idea.
been a front and central issue that much up until very recently.
15 minutes?
Well,
12
12
minutes.
minutes is generally doable, I suppose. My PSA, for my focus for several years anyway, I cover an 1,100 acre PSA. So my response times have 6 minutes. Lucky me. But we do now more, and we've changed the dispatch protocol. This is part of the cooperative effort. We are doing a lot of calls on the east side of town, which improves their response times as well. But they are heavily weighted in favor of ALS responses, all those calculations, so, yeah.
Mike, you,
Thanks, Jeff.
Just point of clarification, with George and his 6-minute response times, the performance measures for Heritage Ambulance does have latitude with that, because what was identified in the plan is 7.5 to 8 minutes. 7.5 to 8 minutes,
Yeah.
that's what's in the plan.
Yeah, but for years, I'm saying it hasn't budged.
You know, the
It's
issue
in
with
my
the
head.
performance measures is that it is accommodating to the service.
So can I just, I just want to hone in on what the exact issues here, because I understand there's some issues, but it's a very large plan. As I'm hearing the discussion, there's actually not a lot of issues. Like there's a couple of issues that need further discussion, need to be addressed. But I really want to understand this response time issue.
One should, yeah.
As I'm hearing it, if you're at 6 minutes and the plan's 8.5, you're okay with the performance standard as articulated in the performance standards section of the plan.
I haven't read the latest. I mean, this has been chewed up and
Assuming
rechewed.
it says 8.5.
Yeah, okay, yeah, if it says 8, well, I'm doing more mutual aid now, so it's folded into the averages.
And then my understanding from this discussion is that Southbury Ambulance is okay with 12 minutes. The concern, as I'm hearing it, correct me if I'm wrong, is the later portion of the document that projects out the next couple of years. Right, 11 to 10. So,
Yeah,
so there's
yeah.
no, am I oversimplifying it by saying there's no objection to the performance standard in the document? There's a concern about the going forward language.
The objectives, just stated, yeah.
Okay, I just want to understand what the concern, so the concern is even more limited than what we started with. So, and then another concern that you raised was something about this Appendix 10. Are there any other concerns that Southbury Ambulance is raising about the EMS plan? So we have the response
You're
time
asking them or me?
Appendix 10.
and the Appendix 10.
Well,
That's,
the QA where the information data comes from.
It's more the data
We don't have
capture.
access to.
got it, okay.
Mike,
Thank you, Jason, for doing that. It was something I wanted to do. The question I have for Chief Baldwin, as you look at this, is the appendix is an appendix to the actual plan.
Yes.
Both services have now said that they have no issues with the 12 minutes and the 8.5 minutes, that are in the plan, which is the performance measure. The issue seems to be in the forward-looking work. So in the spirit of trying to get this done, because I was working on this 4.5 or 5 years ago, and I'd like to see it finished before my term is up. Is there room for some compromise? And does there need to be, well, the plan itself needs to have the specificity of the 12 minutes and the 8.5 minutes for those services. This part doesn't need that. My understanding would be, we could put the goal in, and if there is not agreement yet on that, what that number is, my belief is there may be a way to change the language there, because there's a difference between the EMS plan itself and an objective of the committee, which it should have, to continually improve response time, that has not been, it seems, fully agreed upon yet.
No.
By there, nor have we yet heard what the justifications were for how those minutes would go down each year as such. So in the spirit of trying to get this done, and to a point where the service chiefs are gonna be comfortable signing this, and the committee, and the chief, who's overseen this process for multiple years now, is there language, because the other, as Jason said, the primary plan document, the performance measures, everyone seems okay with. It seems to be the two big issues are that paragraph that was in there, that Betsy had pulled up before, right, in Appendix 8, right? Those specific objectives that aren't really part of a plan, they are an objective, right? And then the owner, what seems to be from what Geraldine wrote to me was that it would be very onerous, some of the requirements in the data capture part that are outlined in Appendix 10, data gathering for ALS. And the language here was
Correct.
reporting details cannot be, this is again from that same email. Appendix 10, reporting details cannot be reported by SAA because some of the info is had by 911 only. Therefore, the report should be asked of dispatch. We've asked and nothing yet. This level of reporting will be cumbersome and time-consuming for SAA. We provide the committee with a report monthly. So that, again, but these are part of the appendix to the master plan, let's call it, right, to the EMS plan. So my question that I think I'd like the committee to consider in this case is there compromise to be had there? Because again, that's forward-looking. The plan itself has that, you know, that time. I hope everyone understands what I'm trying to get at here in terms of 12 minutes and 8.5 minutes. We're good.
You're our Pelosi.
Go- Tim?
So the background behind,
Yes, just so people at home can hear you.
sir?
So the background behind Appendix 10 comes from the EMS committee as they work on the data side of their responsibilities. As you go through this, that's what the bulk of this is, and it's just tied to ALS, not to BLS. There is reports that has been asked for informally from the services that we get from SAA every month that talks about some of this. In regards to the reporting aspect of it, as we look through the conditions that are being looked for, all of this is material that comes from the EMS service. Date, time of call, condition dispatched for, pickup location, patient destination, calls that were downgraded but paramedic went to the hospital, specific dates, times, and reasons for not having any paramedic at all operating at SAA, which isn't happening. I took the time and contacted the provider of the EMS charts, of their electronic patient care reporting, and talked to them and said, listen, this is what I fully disclosed who I was calling on behalf of the committee, the EMS plan and everything. We have two services that use your product, and this is the stuff that's being looked for, but we're being told that they can't get it. And the representative on the phone shared with me, that is what we do. If a customer of ours needs certain reports, we create it for them, and that's part of their annual fee, that we do that for them. So that's, I don't know. But I do know that this has been the concept of data, gathering data. Mike and I sat with First Selectman Manville. We've had some involvement with town IT. Mike and I are both getting reports every day, which we need to get tweaked from dispatch. But that's a lot of what this is. It's a lot of what this is.
Are the, you know, I know this is very much, the plan is based on a form, essentially.
Yes.
That the state provides that we fill in. Is the appendix part, are the appendix part of those, or are those our optional, sort of supplemental information that we're providing to support the plan?
The only appendixes that were not in the town of Springfield is what their sample plan was. Let's see. They had EMS maps, they had governance documents, they had agreements and contracts, they had mutual aid agreements, performance measures, a lot on that. Quality assurance, goals and objectives, mass casualty plans was in there. The only thing that was not is the data gathering. But the concept of including this, which was at the EMS committee meeting, was that this is the town's plan, and how does the town want their EMS service provisions be provided?
Do you believe, Chief, that if this board today said, you know what, there seems to be broad agreement on the core plan, and what appears to be 8 of the 10 appendix areas, if this board approved and the town submitted, right, to the state, everything that's here, other than Appendix 8, the goals and objectives, because there's not clarity here, and Appendix 10 on data gathering, would the plan get approved, or would they come back to us and say, what about Appendix 8 and 10? Or would they say, you know, this is good enough?
Goals and objectives.
And internally, internally, the committee, as it is charged from an advisory perspective, would say, would dig in, still on 8 and 10, working with the providers, so that the first selectman and the board of selectmen will be able to understand what the future-looking plans are, but it's not part of this.
The goals and objectives based off of the format of this change of the legislation needs to be coming from this body and the EMS committee with collaboration with the EMS services. That's how, so what does the town want? Do we want to see defibrillators in every single grocery store in town because of EMS? Then that would be a goal that would be put in there.
Can I suggest instead, I mean, certainly, we can, so we close the door on things. If everybody's good with 90% of the plan, we could just approve that, whether we submit it or not at this point, and then just close the door on that and just keep open the items we need to keep open. The committee's done its work. The committee has gone through this. The committee has worked with the service chiefs. It's now been brought to the Board of Selectmen. The committee is an advisory committee to us, and we're the ones now who are with this, whether to approve it or not. I think at this point, it would make sense for a couple of members of this body to sit down with Tim and the 2 service chiefs and see if we can hammer something out.
And Mr. Wilhelm,
Sure. Well,
or his designee.
fine, I mean,
Yeah.
whoever. I just think, you know, that might be a more streamlined process to narrow in on, these are the 2 issues. Let's all go sit down for a couple hours and figure it out. Because I'm not hearing much disagreement tonight. I'm just hearing there's some roadblocks, and I think that requires, it's gonna require a little movement on both parts. And I think it's important for the decision makers, which is this body, to be in that meeting.
Regarding Appendix 10, there has been movement on the side of the EMS committee where they did take some things out at the request of Southbury Ambulance. There was a couple of things that were requested that the committee said, no, we want to have it in there. So, but there has been.
I just want to, given that the historical nature of emergency management and emergency services, and the talk about goals and objectives of getting something, getting this, an ambulance, let's just say quicker up in the purchase. I want to remind you that many years ago, there was not a firehouse up in the purchase section of Southbury. And it was recognized that response times in the purchase were difficult, long, to come from South Britain up through. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, you probably remember better, but the town built a firehouse up there so that the response time of the firemen or the fire trucks in that area would be quicker. Same reason why there's a firehouse in the Southward section of town. These response times are not looked to be controversial or say, you didn't make that response time, we're going to take your PSA away. I think it's more of, okay, there's been some big developments up in the purchase area. There's a lot more people, everybody sold and built 1 million houses up there. And our response times are taking longer. I think what they're looking at is, okay, so this is changing the response time of what the citizens had expected. How do we address that? Does it mean that we open up a bay in the purchase firehouse so that you can be located closer to that mass area? Or do we build an ambulance, help build an ambulance facility in that area for that? I think we have to remember this not to be a controversial thing like, well, that's your problem. No, it's like, how do we get to that response time being better? Maybe we've had a lot of calls over, and I mean, I know what they do. They also bring the ambulance during football games or athletic events. They're staged over near the high school. The purpose is so there's a quicker response time and they're there. This cuts down on what may be. So I think when we have to look at this, this is not to make it, this goals and objectives they're looking for is not to say, if you don't make it, we're gonna take your PSA. Nobody wants to take the PSA. I don't think there's anybody here on the board that ever thought this was something. But it's something where we could say, okay, we have a measurement, the times have gone up, and why, and look at the demographics, and come up with is there a solution to cutting down, all of a sudden, we're running, most of our runs are up in a remote area and making it difficult. I think that's the goal, the goals, that's the reason for this in there. What could we do to do that? I think that's the purpose. I want to put people at ease. It's not, am I right in that?
And yes, you're right. And to dovetail on that, that's a big part of the purpose of Appendix 10, so that the data is available, so that when this, if that were to need to be analyzed, it's there. It can be monitored, and we can see what's going on. So everything's kind of intertwined, and that's why Appendix 10 is there.
Yeah, and as I sit here today, I don't know what the issues are with Appendix 10. I just know that there's an issue with
Yep.
Appendix 10.
So,
it's gonna flesh that out.
in one of our
and
meetings
understand
on
what
the
it is.
Appendix 10, Bert made very clear about, if we're in a snowstorm, we're going to purchase, we're gonna be this long, we need to account for it. It's like, yeah, you do, but here it is in here, this is why. And when you look at performance measures, it does put an exemption, because George talked about that, is that there is an exemption for weather within the performance measure. It is one of those things.
So I think what we might want to do here is have, if I could suggest Mike and Jason.
Well, I'd have Emily as the liaison
Or,
too.
yeah, that's, okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to overload the.
Agreed.
I found when you get a lot of people, so Emily and Mike, could you sit
Jason's
with?
okay with not being there. I'm fine with, I believe I have 2 meetings until my time's up. I'm not exactly sure when.
We're gonna use every minute we can.
But the
Mike.
4th, we have meetings, this body on November 4th and November 18th.
Right.
My strongest desire is that this board, as constituted, gets to a point where we have brought together everything, and we're all comfortable, right, including the chiefs, very strongly, to stand behind and put signatures on this, our approval and signatures on this plan, because as Jason said, and I think we've all heard tonight, there doesn't seem to be that much distance, actually. There doesn't seem to be that much distance. I think Jason's idea is spot on. And if Emily's open to it, I'm more than glad to participate. I have a little bit of time left until my New York City new gig is starting. So I'm raring to get that done. And other than this weekend, I have time until the 4th, or time until, and we'll find. I think this is an hour. I don't think this is not a lot. This is not going to be that hard, I don't think. And if we sit around the table, we'll get it done, and we'll be able to prove it maybe on the 4th, definitely by the 18th.
Okay, so if I could,
If I could just add to
Go
that.
ahead.
As a keyboard hacker with all this, if we can have the service chiefs submit specific issues that they have, so that we can be expeditious on this.
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
And what I don't want, and I'm looking at George and Bert now, and I hope you'll transfer this to Bert. I hope you transfer this to Geraldine. This was a good discussion, and I think an important discussion for us as a board to hear where everyone's at. What cannot happen, well, it can, but what I hope does not happen in this meeting, when Emily and I, representing this board, gets together with the chiefs and with the chair of the committee and with Chief Baldwin to talk about it, a whole can of worms opens up. Because that would be unfair to the chief, frankly, and to the committee itself. So what I want to do is, and I know Geraldine's not here and she's really leading it, but I do want to give you guys one last chance. If there are, I don't want this to be a nitpicking. This isn't a wordsmithing practice we're in. We've spent multiple years through this. We're past that point. Right now, it seems to be 2 pretty minor issues, frankly, that I believe are addressable. Is there anything else that you view as major? SAA?
The 2 Appendix 8 and 10 are the 2 sections in that.
So could you guys, within a week, send to the rest of the folks that are gonna do this, exactly what the issues are with those 2? I think we've outlined the ones with
Outline in
objectives.
detail what
but-
they are, and come with a recommendation in terms of what would be an acceptable compromise for you on those 2 appendix.
Mike, could you?
I just wanted to say a few words if possible. It's good to finally meet everybody. I'm sorry?
You can keep your hat on.
That's all right.
We're pretty
Is it that bad? So for those that don't know me, I'm Michael Wilhelm, all right? I took on this chairman position you guys definitely gave me a challenge. This is probably my biggest challenge I've ever had in my life. But a lot of the things that I hear, that I've heard throughout my term of doing this so far, the response times were never meant to be punitive. We were never looking, we just wanted to seek for a better response time. That's all it is. When I went through the numbers and we crunched the numbers from dispatch from 2020, and we sent out a report about that, they were already exceeding the times that we're asking. They're already meeting that goal. We want them to just consistently meet that goal and try to make themselves better. And it even goes a little bit further with our last meeting where we actually asked, one of our committee members actually asked, would you be interested in staging somewhere, like you had mentioned? You know, and they said that if they needed to, that's something they would discuss if need be to help with response times. Our numbers are pretty high with response times for a suburban neighborhood, which Southbury is listed as. I know that we're kind of like urban/suburban, but you know, national average is about 8 minutes. So we're not asking for anything more than to make sure that this community stays safe and efficient. And that's all that we're asking. We're never looking to ever take anything away from anybody, despite what people feel. And I know that's the feeling towards me, is that people feel I'm trying to take away the PSA from Southbury Ambulance or Heritage Village. I just want them to be held responsible for their times and try to do better. And, you know, for the betterment for the community. I know our community is a little bit older, and I'm sure they have a lot of calls, which I saw, but the numbers that we were asking for, they're already exceeding that time. So we're just asking to maintain that time. In response to Appendix 10, the information that's there, a lot of that was kind of segued off of some of the conversations that came from some of the chiefs in regards to, they were complaining, not complaining, I don't use the word complaining. They were discussing with us about how dispatch has cold calls and hot calls, and in fact, in our report that we did, we actually even separated those out to see what the response times were for those. And we wanted to figure out, is dispatching hot calls that are really cold calls? And we all know the difference between that, right? The real emergency versus something that's not an emergency. And that's why we asked about downgraded and stuff like that. And that's information I can't really get from dispatch. I need to get that from the chiefs. So that's pretty much what we were looking for. I mean, I'd be curious to see what the response is from the chiefs. I know we said a week. My next meeting is next week. I would love to have that from the chiefs by my next meeting, so we could discuss it at the meeting, if we were gonna do that.
The next EMS committee meeting is October 26th, on Tuesday.
Yeah, so the point I was making, and you know, you guys will follow whatever process you want, and you have your meeting coming up, you can do whatever you want. I feel like we gotta get to the next step of this. Like, that's why I feel like people need to sit in a room privately with members of this body and the chiefs and Tim, and come up and come up with a solution. And I'm not sure that, you know, rushing it through another committee meeting. If you want to have a committee meeting, that's fine, but I think the group that needs to figure this out and hammer together and put their heads together is that group, because it's this body that needs to approve that plan.
I mean, I will do whatever you guys want, and I totally agree with you, but I mean, I think that what we're asking for is reasonable and is appropriate for what even the chiefs were asking us to figure out to help out with dispatch and stuff like that. So I think that information is reasonable. The response time things, I actually was surprised, and I apologize for coming late. But I was a little surprised about the response times, because I didn't hear anything about that since our report came out in September. I didn't hear that from anybody. And the idea was to just, what can you do to improve? That's why it's in the objectives, to decrease it that extra minute. And I think actually I felt 8 minutes was gonna be kind of tough for Heritage Village. That's why I did 8.5, because their numbers showed that would be something they could meet in that report that I put together. But with the reporting, the idea was, and most of it does come from dispatch, like Chief Baldwin said. But we just need some of that information entered in there, so then we know, did a call get downgraded for a reason? Were they not able to? Are we getting our paramedic response that we're asking for? So, I mean, I like your optimism. I would love to sit down with them again, but I mean, this is something that's been going on for. I think it's
right. That's why I said I think, you know, folks here need to sit down as well. And as we sit here today, I don't know that their objection is to the entire thing or a couple of things. Like, I don't know what the objection is, because it hasn't been like. So that's, you know.
It was mentioned once that was the entire thing. So, Mr. Rosen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike?
So I'm gonna let Emily and I look at our calendars.
Yep.
We will then align on dates and times that work for us. We will share them with the chair of the committee, chief, and the chiefs of the two services. We will work to do that as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible. It won't be before Tuesday, but it could be next week, for sure. I mean, certainly could be next week. this doesn't require the committee to vote again, as Jason said, this is now to us.
No,
So
that's
we
true.
can- We can choose to make an edit, and you can, I'm confident, based on everything I've heard, you know, Chief told me that it was a unanimous vote of those who were in attendance at the meeting of the plan as presented. I'm very comfortable that with you and Emily there, that you'll represent the committee's point of view, you know, fine. We'll then report back, with what hopefully is a compromise on some language of those two sections. If something blows up, we'll let everybody know too. And I think we'll get to a point where we can resolve this. And our role here will in some way be to play mediator. You know, to play mediator, to find the common ground on these two things that there doesn't seem to yet be, because everything else seems to be pretty good. And I don't want to make too big of an issue of the whole plan, because it seems like I thought there was this gigantic canyon. There's not. There's just not.
Okay.
So, so I'd like to make I don't know if we need to take
No,
any
we'll-
action at this
no,
point. We can just
we'll
table the
close
discussion
this and
until our
move on,
next
and
meeting.
then we'll just get to that.
Put it on the
slide.
agenda next meeting under.
It will be tabled to the
Yeah,
next meeting.
because you didn't call the vote.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Just clarification, that ambulance is a separate crew altogether, it's not part of the duty crew, we're not staging, that's actually a dedicated crew just for the game.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you know,
It's
the-
a contract with the high school.
that's fine. Yeah, okay. That's,
So Emily, before we leave,
I just, it's great that they're there. It's great that
you're
they're
busier than
there.
me right now, I'm sure.
One way, thank you. You guys can stay and watch the paint dry.
So the EMS plan is later on, you don't need me here, I can like.
We're not gonna, we'll wait for you. We'll just table it.
It works for me anytime.
Cool.
I mean, I assume we're gonna table it on a vote. I think that's the consensus.
Look at October 29th in the morning if you have time, and I'll send a note to Gerald.
That's like 2 days before Halloween, man.
Hey,
Bring your
I'll come
costumes.
dressed up too, I promise.
I thought you did.
Oh, you guys are bad.
My journal's watching this.
Is she?
She's out of state though. Hi, Gerald.
Hi, Geraldine. Thanks for
October
watching.
29th,
Thank you, guys.
Geraldine.
Okay. Next we have is public comments. Any public comments? Please limit them to 2 minutes. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to reports. You have them with you. Announcements and correspondence. You have my update on the first selectmen's update. Next up is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. Minutes of October 7th, 2021, regular meeting. Thanks, Mike, for the motion to approve.
No, I can't, I wasn't here.
I tried. George?
Minutes.
Motion to
Minutes?
approve.
You'll second it, George?
Make a motion to approve, or I can second it if you want,
That'd be nice.
whatever you need.
Thank you, George. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain as I was not in attendance.
Opposed?
Illness.
It'll carry. New business is Southbury EMS plan. Do I have a motion to table?
Motion to postpone it to the next meeting.
I'll second.
Made and second. Emily second. I'll give her that
Keep
one.
that number.
Ding. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it carries. Oh, dear, I think I'm up to the first selectman's report. First, I want to say to everybody, they're going to extend the survey for the Plan of Conservation and Development for another week, and the deadline is now October 27th. So if we could, our people and anybody who could, just please, the more information gathered, the better. Good news on one of the, I just want to read a letter from Marjorie Ansetil, president of CAC in Heritage Village. I couldn't help but write to you to let you know that an amazing employee you have in Melody Sandquist, Southbury's Animal Control Officer. At the invitation of Heritage Village Companion Animal Club, Melody came to our monthly meeting on October 12th As a guest speaker, Melody shared information with our members about how our animal shelter works, protocols for responding to animals. Emergency procedures at the shelter for caring for the animals in its care, what an ACO can and cannot do to help residents who report concerns about stray animals and wildlife matters and issues that are very prominent in our community. Melody is also an excellent speaker. She is very knowledgeable and articulate, and while presenting content that could be complicated, she pitches the information at the right level so it can be understood by everyone. She is great with fielding questions and making sure all members have a chance to ask about animal matters important to them. Melody's passion for her work and her compassion for the subjects of her work become clear as soon as she begins speaking. There's no question that Melody loves her job and role as animal control officer, and I can't speak highly enough of Melody as a member of Southbury's law enforcement team and as a community educator. I just want to say that, the transition from where we were and under Bob Harrison's guidance in forming this, we have a very good animal control office, and we're very fortunate with that. Last the last ARPA meeting, ARPA meeting, we did hear from Pierce Hollow people, and we also heard from social services, and we heard from economic development. Next week on Wednesday, there's another meeting. We're continuing to gather information. That will be at 7 p.m. next Wednesday. There's one more farmer's market next week. I want to thank everyone for a great season, and the weather's been holding. It used to rain every single Thursday the year before. So the weather's been cooperating, so it's been a good farmer's market, and for everybody, if they could come out one last time and cheer our farmers out. There's an employment page. I don't know if anybody's aware of this. I'd like to get this. We've been advertising it. There's an employment page on our website for local businesses, so they can advertise for help they need on their in there. We were just, there's over 30 positions posted so far on there. And I was actually at a ribbon cutting reopening for the paper store today, and they didn't know. So I said, Kevin, make sure that they know that they're a little light on help during the day during the week. So that's a little shout out for help for them if we can. The Spooktacular for the fire department is Saturday. Thank you SVFA and the Ladies Auxiliary for their efforts. This is an adaptation of what they normally do in the firehouse. COVID is restricting, and they want to make sure the children are safe. So they came up with a way to do this outside. Let's say a little prayer for the weather, and hopefully it goes nice and smooth, and the weather's good, and we'll go from there. So that's my reports. Can we have reports from liaisons?
Before we move on, I did have one question. I feel like we talked about Jeremy Swamp Road extension, and I don't know the timing for sure, but it feels like a year ago. And I know that got pushed to planning, and planning voted on it to come back to us, and it hasn't come before this board yet. So can we get an update on where that stands?
So we're waiting for, we had to do our attorney Tinley had said that we need a survey done so that it was specifically in the language of taking it out, what it is. There was a case where one time, just a blanket, whatever it was, they came back, there was a problem. So it has to be, we need the survey. We have the survey. Public Works is, as you know, Jerry Lukowski, we've gone out, we need to make sure that where it ends is at a point from the Plaster House roadside, so that he can move the snow up that to where it's not on the abandoned part. So they're trying to mark that out. And then we need specific language. There's whether it's an abandonment or whether it's there's a term.
Linear Park, I believe
yeah.
is what they wanted.
And we have to make sure that wording is correct, so, unfortunately, we're waiting to get that through our attorney, what the specific wording of it is, so we don't, if you don't do it right, the landowners from the side could go to the center.
Do we have a timeline and when that will be accomplished? I mean, it's been.
I'm hoping
here
with
a
the,
long time.
with the new, with our, I'm hoping to get this done with the attorneys, but like I said, Jerry, we were out there to make sure he had, that the road continues far enough so that it's a road that where he can push snow and, it's ending at the right spot. I'm hoping in the next month or two to get that done. But we wanna make sure it's done correctly, otherwise it won't go right with the abandonment or discontinuance, or we need to make sure it's done right.
I understand there is some erosion on that path. I haven't seen it myself, but I've talked to people that have been on it, and there is some water destruction
Runoff.
on that pathway. I don't know how bad it is, but people that saw it were sufficiently concerned that they commented on it.
Okay.
Maybe there's some repair work required.
Let's take a look. Okay. Anything else? No, George?
One quick thing, George correctly pointed out that the gentleman who apparently harvested a lot of trees up on Cooney Road has just relisted his house for sale.
Yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I noticed it, yeah. And I'm curious if we're still pursuing that?
Yeah. I'll speak to you offline on that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a legal matter. Okay. George?
Okay, yeah, Energy Task Force, I don't know if you folks are aware, but Chuck Liddy was involved in a bicycle accident. He was driving down Churchill Road on his bicycle, and a car, or a truck actually, turned into him and hit him. He suffered some serious injuries, including a partially broken neck. He's required face surgery, and his wrist was badly broken to the point where they had to put in pins and plates and things. So if you didn't know that, I just wanted to make you aware that he's in
I stopped to see him.
tough
It's-
shape. I did talk to him on the phone. I didn't see him, but he seemed, lucid, and he was together. I don't know what kind of medications they have him on, but I imagine he's on something. So there hasn't been much with the Energy Task Force. However, I did visit O&G's, I'll call it a microgrid, where O&G has installed acres of solar panels and some batteries. The batteries actually don't take up much space at all. This was a meeting put together to encourage state legislatures at the state level, or legislators at the state level, to come up with some better programs that are more beneficial to the expansion of solar energy in the state. Right now, there's a lot of restrictions on what can be done based on agreements between, I guess, Eversource and the state energy people. This was I was invited by Cindy Harrison. I think Dave Labriola was there. Eric Berthel was there, and there was another legislator whose name I don't know. And some other people too. It was very informative. That particular facility, that solar array that they put up there, generates all the power that O&G needs. It's a one megawatt rated array, and the batteries, I don't know how big the batteries were, but they're pretty big. So it's quite interesting. They said the payback on it is on the order of 5 years for the solar panels and maybe about 9 years for the batteries. I call it a microgrid, but I don't think technically it is actually a microgrid, but it was an interesting tour. I learned a lot. The Edgewood Committee didn't meet. The Strategic Plan Commission did meet on the 14th. They had a very nice meeting. There was a lot of discussion on many of the issues that they're looking at. Affordable housing is a big one. I'm not sure what they can actually do on affordable housing, but they talk about it. The training school was discussed again, but again, it was more just the reporting we got back from the state. They did answer our questions. There was some talk on the regional community center ideas, but not a lot was said there. There was a discussion on the use of town-owned property. Mitchell Goldberg and Ed Dalterio are the two folks on that. And they're about 80% done with examining the town-owned properties and sort of classifying them into what they think are usable sections of information. Sustainability was talked about, and IT infrastructure, microgrids. In town governance also, there's some movement on that as far as looking at reviewing the town manager option. So it was a good meeting, but nothing was finalized to come to this board. The other committees I'm involved with, road study, IT, cellular mobile, and Edgewood really haven't done anything, so that's it for me.
Jeff, and George might know this, are there any updates on the, because we had approved, I thought for this year's budget, the upgrading of the technology in here?
It, near as we can figure, I asked about this today of Dave, it's probably sitting in some container offshore. It's not, just not available, it's not here. The microphones are, but nothing else is even,
Okay.
we're just, you know the drill, it's sitting offshore.
But the stuff was ordered,
Is that
the,
going?
Oh, yeah, everything was ordered.
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
Are we doing
we're
DNR
working
again?
DNR. It's just
those
waiting.
guys in Waterbury, the folks in Waterbury?
Yeah, it's just not here, the
I think I
parts, but it's not here.
Yeah, the big screens. All right, thanks.
All right. Justin?
Economic Development met here last night. Good meeting. We chatted a lot about Arpa, and I updated them on what that's been all about, and they're gonna weigh in at some point in the next, hopefully next month, with their ideas for us. Kevin was actually not at the meeting. He apparently has been made a member of a state-level economic development commission, which is a great thing. And he was at their meeting. IPOC has not met. It's a quarterly meet, and the next one would be in November. The senior commission was supposed to meet yesterday. They did not. They could not get a quorum together. We have the senior center director's report, obviously. Rides are picking up. More people are coming out, as you would expect as we come out of everybody's pandemic concerns. Tax incentive hasn't met. ARPA did meet, as Jeff mentioned, meeting again next week. Personally, the thing I thought that was the most interesting out of that meeting was that the Pierce Hollow people are only looking for about $1.5 million. To remind you all, the first building up there out of the 4 is gonna cost $15 million. So they laid it out for us, why they only need the 1.5. It builds on another grant, and then with that money, it opens up about $9 million plus in federal funds. The feds and the state have started funding senior housing only again in the last couple of years, so we do have a real shot. We'll have an attempt, we will be able to apply this year, and we will apply next year. So we'll have 2 opportunities before the 2024 deadline to get there. And the consultant that they work with, the management company that manages Grace Meadows for us, their president was with us. It's very impressive.
He manages a lot.
He manages north of 5,000 units
Yeah.
in the Northeast, so he certainly knows how to get these things done. He just got a project approved in Hartford. Personally, I thought that was all very exciting, and I thought the fact that they only would need, I thought they were gonna ask us for 5, to be honest with you. So,
I think we all did.
yeah. And I mean, you could argue that maybe that's the way to go. But anyway, I thought that was fantastic news, and looking forward to the next meeting. That's all I got.
Selectman Bucksbaum?
So the only one of my groups that met is the ARPA task force, which we've heard a lot about at this point in the meeting. But I'll just piggyback on that. I mean, the Pierce Hollow folks really gave a good presentation, and we were all heavily involved in that a couple of years ago, trying to lobby the state and trying to get them to free up money for that organization. It's such an important project in town, and all of our bodies and whatnot have been supportive of it. And they seem hopeful that maybe state and federal funding could open up, and maybe a little bit of money from us to show that they have the wherewithal to do it could be enough to open that up. So we're going to have to take a serious look at it, because it's really it's a needed project in our town. So it was a very interesting discussion. And as Jeff mentioned, we also had the social services director. We talked about the various charities in town and nonprofits, and whether something could be done to help people individually through some sort of grant program or something like that. And Kevin was also there, and he's actually, in all likelihood, going to be coming back to us with more information on various aspects of different town properties and things like that, and studies and whatnot, and things that might be able to be done. And looking forward to next week's meeting.
If I could expand a little bit, just a little bit on that ARPA presentation. I just want to be clear that I think our argument is that senior housing, as presented by the gentleman who does a lot of these, this is not just a Southbury project. I mean, I think that's what we heard. It's not just the Southbury project. All the senior housing developments, I always kind of thought that we were the ones with the backlog. There's a lot of backlog in other municipality areas. So if this was to develop, it's not just Southbury, but it could relieve some of the elderly housing in the surrounding communities. So I'm hoping that the state recognizes this as not just a Southbury need, but as a state community elderly housing need. I think that's what I got back from this. It's not just Southbury, there's all the surrounding communities. So if we have a place to do it, and a piece of property, a little help from us, maybe the state, get into this federal money, which is finally loosening up. There was not money for the elderly housing side of it. We met with the commissioner, and I think that she came out and met with us, and I think they agree too. But they've got to get the federal money, and it's pretty complicated how it works with getting the money and stuff. But hopefully there's some light here. So we need to do this for all the communities, around. Selectman Harrison.
Well, I think we've heard a bunch on the EMS committee. The one question that was outstanding from our last meeting, though, is that they still have an alternate position open on that board. And has there been any consideration? I mean, that's been going on for some months now, to repost that, to do something that we can get another committee member to fill that alternate position.
Emily, is it a minority representation issue? Is it it's not, okay, so
No.
it can be
No,
either,
it's open to anybody.
open, okay.
Yeah, which is why it's surprising it's sat vacant for as long as it has. Nothing's come to the board for approval or for review or anything.
So we just have to promote it.
Anything else?
Well, that was a question. Is there going to be a reposting for the?
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised it's not out now.
Okay.
I mean, if you ever have a concern about that, give me a call in the office, and we'll it
Asked
should
about
be
it at the
listed
last-
out there.
Asked about it at the last meeting, so that's why. And then on the library, they have their book sale coming up next week, so everybody keep an eye out for that. And I know that they've been diligently working with the Director of Public Works to get some much-needed projects done there, or some tree work and other odds and ends to keep the library looking as great as it always does. And and participating in the POCD. So had a good meeting last week with them, and EMS meets next week.
Mike?
The only one of my committees to meet since last is planning. Parks and Rec meets next Wednesday or Thursday, Region 15 meets Monday. Planning met. There were some good develops. It started with a public hearing on Tuesday, right here, with some approvals for a new child daycare facility that's going to be going in the back of where the Riverview Cinemas are, and Bobby LaFlame was there with the architect, and that's moving along, and it got the hearing got approved for this special exception in the site plan. Similarly, Arts Escape, which is in the village now, I had an approval. They're doing some work there, which is exciting. As had been in the newspaper, it was continued, but there's a site plan modification application in by Gyre 9, who's the company that's going to be opening the EV charging manufacturing facility, which is moving along. There was a continuation of it, but no problems there. Of note to everyone, I think there was a discussion. There was a zoning committee referral to planning for some signage issues at Southbury Green. It was a good, robust discussion. There are some tweaks into the text amendment and the more modified detailed plans that were asked. That's going to be done quickly and should be approved I believe at the next meeting. But it's going to put some more parameters around the signage opportunities there. And folks from Regency who run Southbury Green were there and were aligned. It went really well. And that's it. There was a discussion. Jeff mentioned the extension on the POCD. There was a discussion there. The numbers seem low, response is low compared to 10 years ago. So I certainly do urge everyone listening here, and tell your friends and neighbors if they're in town. It's an incredibly important planning opportunity for the town, for the future of the town, and it takes 10 minutes maybe to complete it online. You can pick up a paper copy here at the library, other places as well, but it's really easy, and it's really important that not only this board, but pretty much every commission in town really is influenced in some way, shape, or form with the POCD. I think the number we were given earlier this week was about 900 or so.
I think so, you're right.
And think about it, with a town of 20,000 thereabouts, it's not a great response. And it's about half, I think, of what we had 10 years ago. I think that was the number. They weren't sure, but the number 1,800 kept popping up. So I'd really encourage all of us, certainly, to use whatever channels we have to try to help spread the word on that. So that's it.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Have a second? Mike? Emily? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor of adjourned? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It carries. Thank you.